Now for further analysis of these results and also what it means for us here in Korea, we have with us Professor Song Se-ryun from Kyung Hee University. Professor, it's good to have you back on the show.
Nice to be here.
So it was as the polls had predicted, but especially considering what happened in 2016, there was still an impact when these results were announced. So the Republicans have kept the Senate and the Democrats have taken control of the House of Representatives instead. What is your initial reaction to these results?
Well, it's just as expected, but at the same time, it is a very seismic shift in the American politics because so far, President Trump had it good. He had a Senate, he had a lot of governors on his side, and the House as well. So his policies potentially could have been a very ideal situation. But now, as most of the midterm elections are, it goes to the opposition party. So at this point, the House went to the Democrats, so he will expect a lot more scrutiny on this. Overall, picture is that there will be more checks and balances. I think there has been a lot of scandals about his policies and how the things have come about. So in that sense, probably it's getting back to a more normal situation where there will be more bodies and eyes looking at his policymaking.
You say checks and balances, but what does that actually mean? I mean, how does this change things about how he has to govern for the next 2 years?
Well, the House usually has more power in the budget setting, and budget in many ways could affect his policymaking. So in that sense, there will be more investigations, more inquiries, more explanations that the executive branches has to provide. So in that sense, there will be more paperwork, I guess. And also, some people are expecting that because of how he bulldozered a lot of policies, especially trade issues and immigration and all those, potentially Democrats could, not that they will, but could make the life of Donald Trump quote-unquote living hell. But we'll see what happens. But Nancy Pelosi, to her credit, she talked more about bipartisan effort to put things back in the normal path. So we'll see what happens. But on the Senate side, it's a win for Donald Trump because where he campaigned more, most of the wins came from the states. So in that sense, if this is a referendum, it's a mixed bag because he lost the House, was expected as the midterm goes, but his popularity, again, was verified, at least in the Republican sector.
Yes, so, as you said as well, it's called a referendum on Trump's presidency so far, but then this mixed bag, I mean, where do we stand here with America then? Like, what, is this a rejection of Trump's, his time in office, or is this some sort of, as you said, like a mixed bag? How do we interpret this as outsiders looking at the American situation right now?
Well, in all wisdom of the voters, I mean, it's the same thing in American election and U.S. I think it's ambiguous, maybe purposefully ambiguous. There's a message that they liked the results that the President Trump has produced in terms of a good economy, and showing the weight around the world. But at the same time, his way of getting about doing things has raised a lot of eyebrows, and a lot of felt that there needs to be more checks and balances and more scrutiny. I think the House of Representatives are charged to that role. I think the more interesting question is whether this helps or does not help his re-election bid. I think that President Trump already claimed victory, and I think there is a reason for his celebration in that prospect because where he campaigned, he recorded some wins. By the way, ex-President Obama, where he campaigned, he did not really produce much results, especially in the Senate side. So in that sense, he could gloat and he could do a victory dance on that issue. But we saw that overall, if we're talking about the the American people as a whole, I think there is an element of rebuke about how the Donald Trump was a divisive figure, and this referendum, in that sense, sends a message.
I think this year more than ever as well. I mean, there were many other countries looking at these results and seeing, how they fit into all this as well. I think especially South Korea as well. We have a lot of things tied with the US, especially with the situation with North Korea and our economy as well. I mean, for South Korea, what do you think the results of how they affect South Korea?
Well, it's hard to figure what the direct result is, but considering that the Democrats on the House is more favorable to the trade issues, so probably there will be more kind of easing of tensions in the trade war, but that could be good for a global economy, global trade situation. So in that sense, Korea will benefit from easing of tensions in a trade war. That's the economy side. I think the security and especially the North and South matters probably not much of an issue, because in terms of security and the foreign policies, probably the Senate is have more on the weight. And besides, Donald Trump has shown his penchant for doing things the way he likes to doing regardless of what the Congress is saying anyway. So I think that his style of pushing through the negotiations, especially between the U.S. and North, probably will continue the way he wanted designed.
Now, following on from these elections, we were going to look at the results and then see perhaps how it would affect the upcoming talks between U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and a senior North Korean official, Kim Yong-chol. They were supposed to have a meeting in New York on Thursday, but now it's been announced by the U.S. State Department that the meeting has been suspended. At the moment, there's no real reason given and no details as such of when it will be held again. What do you think is going on? Why do you think this is suddenly happening?
It's a little bit of a head scratcher. It's unusual that it's canceled in 2 days before, so we can only speculate. However, this is not the first time we're seeing this. North Korea has a habit of canceling or rescheduling things. We saw that in Singapore meeting. We saw that they're canceling off or not showing up for some meetings, and also Vienna meeting as well. So it could be that it's a posturing. And considering that we are getting into a stage where we're really talking about what to do about denuclearization, probably North Korea feels that they need to be cautious about how they go about doing things, and never show a sign that they're eager to do this more than the U.S. does.
We've been here before, you say, but how concerned should we be still? Because when this happened last time, the US did show a lot of frustration, and they started really pushing back on North Korea to say, we're not going to accept these kinds of delays and postponements anymore. Do you think there's a risk that there could be further delays or even a breakdown in the negotiation talks? I
think there is a real concern. During this period of negotiation, several times even I thought that North Korea was overplaying their hands. And thankfully there was a process of mediation, and I think that President Moon played the role by keeping the process going. But I think that North Korea needs to be really careful at this point, because Donald Trump does not really need North Korea at this point. Probably he would feel that North Korean triumph or claiming victory on the peace side will help him to be reelected. So in that sense, there is plenty of room at this point. But in terms of where it should happen or when it should happen, how it should happen, probably Donald Trump could be in a situation to push it pretty tough. But then North Korea has thrived in a tough and tenseful situation, and they themselves created a lot of tense situation anyway. So I think that if this is a posturing, probably this will not be the last time we see it. But at some point, both parties have an incentive to get it going. This change of atmosphere, having these talks postponed again, it comes at
as a bit of a surprise as well, even further considering some comments made by some other US officials. So Marine General Joseph Dunford, he's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, told the forum on Monday that if negotiations with North Korea continue to go well, they will have to start making some changes to the military posture on the peninsula. He said, I quote, the more successful we are in the diplomatic track, the more uncomfortable we will be in the military space. So this obviously shows signs that they were expecting these talks to continue going well. But even without that, I mean, this is quite a surprising remark, especially from a general in the US military. What should we make of this?
It is. And to some level, that's kind of as a matter of fact, a statement. There's nothing strange about the statement itself. If the peace process goes on, the justification to build up or have a large military presence, it diminishes. But the timing is very curious, and judging from the Blue House's reaction that they had no idea where it came from, I don't think it's a coordinated effort or a coordinated statement from the U.S. side. But I think that this continues to be the concern, that even when North Korea says, oh, the U.S. military troops in South Korea is a separate matter to whatever they are discussing, this will come up. This will come up, and the fact that this, I would say, a little bit of a careless remark because of the timing, came from the U.S. side. This adds to the kind of continuing risk that this will cause some schism, not only between the North and the U.S., but when the China joins in because of their concerns about the THAAD and the security matters in Korean Peninsula, probably this could become a kind of tricky and thorny issue.
And while all this is going on as well, the South Korea and North Korea continue their own interaction and cooperative projects. There have been quite a few over the last few days as well. But the two Koreas today are also holding talks again, this time on medical and health cooperative projects. This is the first time in 11 years that they're talking on this subject. What outcome can we expect, and how important are these kinds of talks going forward?
Well, given the public health issues in a global scale, probably this is necessary, especially when we're neighbors. This has a context in that there was an agreement before to continue on the talks in many different fronts, and the public health side came along. I would say this is meaningful because the talks between the North and South has been varied in many different areas. We're dealing with each other in sports, military, and culture, economics, and now public health. So the overall picture is that we're talking, first of all, and talking in a constructive way and in a variety of different areas. Probably this has to continue. I'm just hoping that this will not be disrupted by the miscalculation or overplaying the hand by the North Korea or the U.S. to make the talks break down.
We've covered a lot of topics today, but let us go back to the beginning as well. We started the U.S. midterm elections. I just want to get your final thoughts on before we go. Going ahead as well, looking forward to the issue with North Korea as well. I mean, do you think these midterm elections will have any kind of implications for the U.S.-North Korea talks? Do you think they had an effect on perhaps the Pompeo and Kim Yong-chol talks today as well?
Well, that's a very difficult question, because what is interesting about the North and U.S. is that Donald Trump's domestic situation is very much related to what he does in the world stage foreign policy postures. So I think the President Trump kind of dodged a bullet, a big bullet. He obviously is facing a very new day, having a Democrat taking control of their House. But going forward, what happens in the domestic matter will affect, one way or the other, to his thinking about how he will hold up his legacy and how he would stack up his number of victories so that it will go over well in the re-election bid. So I think that we'll continue to see what happens between the North and the U.S., how the talks progress, but at the same time, what happens in the domestic matters. Whether his presidency goes into suddenly lame duck stage because of the investigations, or does he keeps up his re-election ambitions and go on campaigning and include this potential victory for the peace in his arsenal to appeal to the voters.
Well, that's all we have time for today. Thank you for coming in and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you, my pleasure.